fascinating to look back at the catalogue of a band like Crocodiles. Not that there are too many bands like Crocodiles. There's the consistency, the tunes, the hooks, the harmonies, that sort of feeling of sort of escapism. There's the unexpected, like the kind of the sonic departures, the reinvention. How they make a new Crocodiles record always sounds kind of like Crocodiles, and how they then sort of throw you an entire record of covers that really sort of blows you away, and then deliver something that kind of confounds you, but doesn't in a kind of how the fuck do they do it kind of way. And then hit you with Upside Down in Heaven, the last one, which for me, for where I am in my life, is really my favourite.
Thank you.
Anyway, Brandon Welch's is now getting stuck into a new project, Psychic Pigs, and it's this adaptability of doing new things, working with different people, and perhaps in ways that they're possibly a little bit alien, getting out of your comfort zone, the sort of open-mindedness to take on new challenges that really interest me. So hopefully that's some of the stuff that we're going to have a chat about. So I'll kind of quit that out, and then Brandon, welcome. Thanks. It's so good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, nice to see you as well, man.
So look, I mean, maybe we'll start there. We'll start with Psychic Pigs, and I think you've just, or in the last sort of few days, played a show with Justin.
Yeah, we did. I see you have the Retox shirt on. Yeah, we did we opened for Swing Kids at this place called Lodge Room, which is like a really beautiful venue here in LA.
Yeah.
A week ago. Oh no, what's today? Tuesday. Say Tuesday or Monday?
It's Tuesday.
All right, there we go. So a little over a week ago. Yeah, it was super cool. Just I'm a little too young to have seen Swing Kids in their original incarnation.
Yeah.
Like I think I got into hardcore maybe like 2 years after they broke up or something. But I saw like Locust pre-Uniform shows and like a lot of other bands from that era.
Yeah.
And what struck me was the fact that there's so many like young kids. It was an all ages show, so there was like tons of teenagers and people in their early 20s and stuff, which is really cool because obviously that means that this music has like maybe a longevity that wasn't expected or even considered at the time. And then the fact that there was just so many people there. There was maybe like 500 or 600 people there, which
wow, that's incredible.
I remember some of those shows back in the day of bands like that. There'd be 10 people watching, maybe. So it's cool.
It's funny, isn't it? I have noticed that as well with some kind of bands that have either sort of reformed or might kind of go through a bit of a sort of resurgence. From that era, or even before then into the 80s, and there's such a wider appeal, kind of like across ages, perhaps just a kind of like a wider demographic of people that are getting into that music. Yeah. It's really fascinating then.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I thought the most interesting one was Orchid, like Orchid's reunion. When I saw Orchid in like 1999 or 2000, it was in a record store with like 20 people, or 30 people, and it still seemed like a big deal. Like, oh my God, this like really awesome band from the other side of the country.
Yeah.
And in our world, that was kind of a big audience. There's 30 people here. It's amazing, And when they played LA last, they played a place called the Belasco, which I think holds like 1,200 people or something, and I think they might have done 2 nights. It's fucking crazy. But I was thinking about it too. And I think that maybe things have become like a little bit more codified, and this isn't good or bad. So I think like new kids coming up can go like, I'm into screamo or like whatever it is. And, if you were around in that original era, it was all kind of just hardcore, or even just fell under the umbrella of punk, like you could go see a band like Orchid one day and then the next day go see something that sounded more like Johnny Thunders. And it still kind of felt like, at least in a small town, like where I come from, San Diego, that all just felt like the punk scene, so maybe the fact that it's become more codified and you have these like this new generation of kids who are like, I'm into screamo and I'm into hardcore, and they can really rally around these bands. It's cool, and I feel happy for all these musicians who didn't, who were guys my age or like a little bit older who never really got credit back then for the innovative stuff they were doing with punk and hardcore,
I mean, I know that like my partner's nieces are, kind of 21, 22 and 18. And are kind of like really into, I mean, a lot of the, kind of Bikini Kill, L7, that
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
generation, but also before that, like kind of Bauhaus
yeah.
and stuff like that, and I guess that, there's a thing around accessibility as well. It's easy to kind of find music, isn't it, these days?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about that too. That like when I like the band that changed my life was the Sex Pistols, and
Mm,
I remember getting John Lydon's first book, and him mentioning bands like Can and Noi and Big Youth and T
yeah,
Rex and all this stuff that um I mean, it took me months, if not years, to like track down and be able to actually hear that stuff because
yeah,
the internet wasn't like a thing. I mean, the internet
yeah.
existed, but it wasn't like you could just go to
It
YouTube
was
and be like,
pretty
I want to hear
basic.
what noise sounds like, or I want to hear what Big Youth sounds like. So,
Yeah,
um, and again, I don't think it's like good or a bad thing, but if a kid hears the Sex Pistols, feels like it changes his life. I mean, he could completely educate himself on everything and over the course of a few hours, and get the
uh,
kind of same education that you or me probably took years to build.
years. Yeah,
And
I
I don't
do
mean
kind
that
of.
like a jaded old man. I realize I
No,
sound
no,
like a jaded
no.
old man. Yeah.
I know. I think what I'm about to say probably makes me sound like a jaded old man, to be honest with you. But I do wonder about it, because I'm not like this is going to sound like a real sort of like when I was a kid, but there was, you know, I'm still, massively into music, but I remember just like almost like the kind of the adrenaline that I would have when, go into like a sort of records shop in my hometown, which was a kind of smallish town in the north of England.
Hmm.
And, I would be sort of taken in by the record covers. And I
Mm.
remember it was like kind of, kind of bands like Susie and the Banshees and Killing Joke,
Yeah.
that sort of. I mean, the Ramones were my first love,
Hmm.
but for once I discovered them, then kind of like going a little bit further, it was really it was kind of the artwork, the physical stuff that because I didn't know what it sounded like, but it
Yeah.
almost felt like this, kind of like other world
Yeah.
that
And you could kind of
maybe,
like gamble on it,
yeah,
just being like, this looks like it's going to be cool. I bet it's going to be cool.
exactly, yeah, that was
Yeah.
kind of it,
Yeah.
and I don't get. I guess it. I get it. I get the rush in a different way. I
Yeah.
suppose it's a weird kind of thing.
Yeah. What was I going to say? I also think that I remember from that era, like if I saw a band and they had like the T-shirt of another band on, I'd want to check out that band.
That band as well. Yeah,
Yeah, or like if they had like a thanks list and they were thanking other bands in their record, I'd want to check out those bands. Oh, who are they
check out.
friends with? Who are they touring with? Or who did they tour with? Who were they friends with? Because it was usually bands that were already broken up. When I was first getting into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
So so with I mean with Psychic Pigs. I mean how does that sort of fit into? I mean, is this kind of like part of your kind of like your own evolution as a sort of person, as a musician, doing something that's a bit different.
um, I mean, I moved around a lot in my adult life, and I tend to like. I mean, Crocodiles, is my baby, and that's a
Mm,
project I have with my best friend and my longest running
mm,
thing, the thing that earns me a little bit of money and stuff like that.
yeah.
But my bandmate lives in Paris, so it's not like
Mm,
we can only really play shows when we tour, and I'm very lucky. We're very lucky that we still tour a couple times a year, so we still see each other.
yeah.
And we're still active. But like when I came to LA, I mean, I was playing with my ex for a while, but I didn't really have like my own thing.
Mm, mm,
So it was important to me just to be able to have the fun, to be able to like play shows once in a while. I was feeling like kind of left out and even like a little jealous when I go to shows. Like nobody knows I'm a fucking rocker here. um, and yeah, I mean, just because of where Crocodiles, as you were mentioning earlier, I mean, we grant ourselves a lot of freedom to play whatever kind of music we want. We have some like very pretty songs, some very ugly songs, and we'll
mm,
do whatever we want to do. But that
mm,
being said, both of us come from the punk and hardcore world,
mm,
and I kind of feel like for my like mental health, I always need to have some sort of punk band going. Like when I lived in New York, I had a project called Flowers of Evil. We did 2 records.
mm,
And then I moved to Mexico for a few years, and I had a punk band there that Slovenly also put out called Xeno and the Thetans.
mm.
I just I need to have something like that going for some reason. I don't know why. I'll probably be like an old man with a walker that's like trying to put my hair in a mohawk or something. I don't know. I'm interested in all sorts of stuff, and I want to play all kinds of music. Like lately, I've really been desiring to somehow be involved in like either a country record or a reggae record.
Mm.
But that being said, like I will still be like diligently trying to write Psychic Pig songs as well, so I can have something like that always going, you know?
It's interesting that, like you mentioned about the I guess the kind of mental health stuff, but more that you kind of need the music. I remember asking it was Will from Dialect,
Mm-hmm.
the sort of the hip hop band,
Mm-hmm.
and I said to him, because he writes about it's pretty deep, dark stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I said what, and I realized after that I was asking it from um almost like a listener's perspective, because I said to what's your escape, and he's just like, man, this is my escape. This is my
Yeah.
escape. The kind of the whole creativity, and it's since I started, I've realized that since I started doing this podcast, and also started doing my own kind of like video and graphic design stuff, exactly
Mm-hmm.
what he meant. I think it's only when you start. What it was for me, it was when I started doing that. I was like, yeah, of course it is
Oh yeah, definitely. I
the
mean, I
creation.
definitely think that like, I mean, I think in creative types, I mean, I think there's a reason creative types kind of gravitate towards what we gravitate towards. You know, I think that there's probably like a lot of sensitivity, maybe a little bit more sensitivity than like the average person. Um, I mean, just seeing over the years how many of my friends became like drug addicts and stuff like that. You know, I think that
Mm,
there's probably some mental health issues that we all have a little bit. You
yeah,
know, whether that's
yeah.
depression or whatever, just being sensitive and
Mm,
more
mm,
affected by the world. And yeah, I think that in some ways, the creative aspect is therapeutic, you know, and maybe
yeah,
you don't even realize that when you start doing it, you're just doing it because it's fun. But then you recognize that when you don't have it going on in your life, if you're too busy to be working on stuff like that, then the kind of dark shit starts to creep back in because you don't have this outlet, you know?
yeah, yeah. So if we like going back to when you were a kid, sort of growing up. I
A
mean,
long time ago.
oh man, I try to remember mine. I ask these questions, and I'm thinking, I hope nobody asked me about mine because I can't remember. But what what do you remember as being the kind of standout things that you remember? Stuff that's maybe sort of stayed with you, your formative influences, I guess. You know,
Culturally speaking.
not just musically, just kind of anything. Some things that have stayed with you and have formed who you are.
Well, the first thing I think that I thought was really truly cool and magical, and I wanted to be a part of. I was born in New Jersey, and we moved to San Diego, California, when I was 6, like right before I
Mm,
turned 7. I have an older brother, so he would have been, he would have been like about 11 years old. And so when we moved here, pretty quickly he got into, he must have met neighborhood kids or kids at his school or
mm,
something, and he got into skateboarding.
mm,
And since he was my older brother, I tried to tag along everywhere and really looked up to him. So I also got into skateboarding, and because we lived in the epicenter of skateboarding culture,
yeah.
it was quite easy to access some of these iconic people just because you'd go to like a skate spot that was skating distance from our house,
Wow.
and there'd be
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
professionals there. Some of like the businesses had their headquarters in San Diego, and there was always like demonstrations and like all this kind of stuff you could go to. And
Mm,
I just remember, I mean, this is the 80s. This would have been like 87, 88. So this is the era of like, kind of like the Tony Hawk hair and
yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
neon clothes and, spray painted ramps. And I just remember thinking like these guys who I guess were probably just teenagers, like, wow, these are like the coolest people in the world. Like I need like hot pink shorts. Like I wish I
Yeah.
had straight hair so I could have like the Tony Hawk haircut and like do this all day with my hair. I have curly hair, so I've never had to do this. I always thought that move was cool. But yeah, so I mean, culturally, that was the first thing that I felt really like affected by, and was something that wasn't, you know, something my parents had shown me, or that wasn't
Mm,
like pop culture per se,
mm,
that every other kid was into or something like that. So, and that also introduced me to a lot of music via skate videos, like very early. I heard I mean, it was even too early to like put two and two together, but like, I heard the Ramones very early. I heard Operation Ivy very early. I heard
mm,
Sonic Youth very early. I heard a lot of great hip hop very early, just because of these videos, and
mm, mm.
and I would buy some of these CDs. I mean, way before I identified as a punk, I had Ramones mania, just because, and I had it amongst crap that I probably had too. I mean, I probably had like Motley Crue tape. I'm not saying Motley Crue's crap per se. Maybe you're a fan, but like, I had stuff like Motley Crue.
I'm not really, but
okay.
I know.
I don't get down on people's music, so I try not to be insulting towards other musicians, or
Agreed,
But I just had
understood.
like I had a lot of corporate rock because I was a kid and I listened to the radio. So that stuff and like 60s stuff. My parents showed me that the most obvious Beatles and Stones and stuff like that. But then amongst that, I would have Ramones and start to be also collecting this other stuff that I would hear in skateboarding videos. So that was a big one. And then I remember when I was 10, Nirvana Nevermind came out, and to me that was like super cool too. And I thought Kurt Cobain was really inspiring because I was already, I didn't have this word for it, but I was already becoming like resistant to like toxic masculinity and stuff like that. So to like finally have this like iconic guy who seemed like in touch with his feminine side and seemed to like speak out against homophobia and stuff that I already thought was lame. My parents had a lot of gay friends, so I already thought that homophobia was lame at that age, and that wasn't the popular opinion, at my school or anything like that. But so it was cool to have this like everyone's favorite rock star all of a sudden, and he's on my side and shares the same opinions I share. And obviously more refined, and I can learn more from him by reading interviews and watching interviews and seeing, the bands that they would take on tours and stuff like that. So I think that was like my second inspiring thing. And then the final one that changed my life was in 7th grade. This kid made me a tape that was, sorry, my cat is going kind of crazy. I don't know if you can hear that. It was Never Mind the Bollocks on one side and Dead Kennedy's Fresh Fruit, Rotting Vegetables on the other. And that tape, like that changed me overnight.
Just blew your mind. Yeah.
I changed the way I dressed. I started identifying as I basically stopped skateboarding because I just wanted to play guitar all day and start dancing with my friends. I changed the way I dressed, like everything, and that was kind of, the last major influential change on me was probably that, and because I feel like that's what led me to where I am now,
And with the it's kind of interesting, the sort of the moment, and I'm always interested what that moment is and why you kind of gravitate towards it. Because like for me, for example, I like when I was a kid, I'm an only child, and when I was a kid, I always felt like the kind of spotlight was on from my parents. So musically, I started learning the cello when I was 8. Started when I was 8. I did all my exams through to when I was about and gave it up when I was about 17. Never looked at it again, until a few years ago. And there's another story there, but it's like, it never felt that it was mine. And also, I in my teenage brain, then I couldn't reconcile that classical side with the punk music that I like. If it had been now, then I'd be interested in like how they kind of come together in some way. But Definitely. At that time, I just wanted to listen to punk rock music. And I remember it was weird because it was actually my neighbor. I was with my mum and dad, and their neighbor lent me this compilation record, and it was Judy as a Punk. When I first heard that, it was just like that was, and I've tried to work out why it was that just attracted me so much. Because I was the same as you. I was listening to other stuff before that was not punk. I was listening to, I had some Queen, I had some really dodgy stuff in my collection, But when this came along, it's like, fuck, this is just magnificent. This is what I want to do. It's weird.
I don't know what it is. It's exactly that. And like, the Ramones are one of my all-time favorite bands, but it was something about like, I don't know what it was about John Lydon that I just found so, like seeing photos of him in that era and videos of him in that era, he didn't look much older he looked like an older, cool kid at my school, like because he probably was 18 or something, like, so if I was 13 or 14, he wasn't that much older than me. And I think I'd just never seen a young person with like that. Obviously I'd seen confident young people in other rock stars. George Harrison was only 17 or 18 when he became famous, and he was plenty confident too. But like, I think John Lydon to me at that time spoke truth to power in a way that resonated with me because of, you know, like there's that famous thing he talks about. There's an interview maybe with what's her name? Anyways, I can't remember her name, some famous British journalist, but where he's talking about school, you know, they take your brains away, they take your soul away, you're not allowed to have a mind of your own. I can even quote some of it. And I remember being like, that's exactly what I fucking feel like, man. Like that's exactly what I feel like. And just like, I think that was the first time, like I didn't emulate or try. I mean, I couldn't have tried to look like him because I have curly hair, but like, I didn't try to like look like him or emulate him. You know, I didn't start singing in the English accent. A lot of my friends became Anglophiles and started pretending they were, you know, like Cockney or something. I'm like, you're not Cockney, you're from fucking California, you know? But just his belief in himself, you know, the confidence, like the ability to just be yourself. I think all that stuff just resonated with me, you know, because I think school, society in general, and this is probably all just part of capitalism really, but you know, you're encouraged to conform, you know, and you're encouraged to kind of like fit into these really small parameters, you know, which again is probably just preparing us to be like obedient workers. But, you know, I didn't have like that kind of like class analysis at the time, you know, but I just thought, fuck school. Like, you know, like it's just, yeah. I mean, I felt exactly like what he was saying. Like they're just trying to like take my ability to think for myself away from me, you know, and like, and all of a sudden it made me realize, like, it just gave me confidence about so much stuff. Like I got less, like I didn't have crazy bad acne, but I got less embarrassed about it because I was like, fuck it, these are punk beauty marks. Like I'll just look like a freak, you know, like I don't care, you know, and like, and, you know, I started to find my circle of friends at school, you know, and it was a small school. So kind of anyone who was weird, metalheads, kids into ska, punks, you know, anyone who was kind of in any kind of marginalized group, we all tended to hang out together. And that also kind of gave me confidence because it felt like a strength in numbers, safety in numbers thing, you know, like we're the freaks and like we did get bullied a lot, but like there's a bunch of us, like they can't really do anything. Like we could beat them up too, you know, and like, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, but I guess I'm going on a tangent here, but there was just something like you're describing. Like I heard his voice, I heard the words, I saw the photos, and I just like, I felt like that's me. Like that is me. That's exactly how I feel, you know?
I think you're right. I think you're right with that. I bet that's probably that. I think you've explained it how I've been thinking about it, but couldn't really put it into words. It's that it's a relatability, isn't it? Almost that, you know, you could you know through the lyrics, perhaps the look, the sense of being your own person. I think that was particularly important for me because you know, I went through a lot of my life, you know, sort of, you know, I guess sort of worrying what people think, and at that time, you know, when you kind of when I was a you know sort of young teenager, I mean, I started listening to them. Maybe I was about 12. So what? That was about sort of 1980, 81 when I was getting into them, and that was a big deal for me. Where it's like, you know, you're still kind of forming, and somebody is showing you a way to be your own person. That's kind of that's kind of quite a big deal, you know.
Yeah, I think it's like very powerful.
And also then, you know, like I spent a long time sort of talking with my dad about, you know, about politics and stuff like that. He was, you know, very much you know, kind of socialist, you know, that you know, sort of socialist view. So we talked a lot about that, and then obviously that was related in a lot of the band's lyrics that you know that attracted me. It wasn't necessarily just the music. There was the lyrical side of it that I was really interested in as well.
Sure, of course. Yeah, same here. Yeah. And I definitely feel like punk informed my politics. I mean, same. My parents are very left leaning. So, you know, I was lucky that I didn't have to like fight any kind of like weird right wing indoctrination or like bigoted indoctrination or anything like that. Because a lot of my friends did have to overcome some of the like bullshit that their parents taught them. But yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of the stuff I heard, especially when I started to listen to bands like Crass and Subhumans and the anarcho stuff, like it really like broadened, and then also like Fugazi and stuff like that. Like it really kind of like gelled the politics I had already kind of been forming just based on my parents' example, and took it even further. I'm way further left wing than they are now, but you know, Yeah. I think
I,
that that was all very helpful part of the education, you know.
I remember talking to Alice from who was in Chumbawamba, Alice
Hmm.
Nutter, who was in Chumbawamba, and she was saying in their very early days, well, I think very early days through for quite a long period of time, they were, I think they formed in like 1982, and she said that she was talking about how powerful being in um, lowercase kind of gang was. You know, they all lived together in like in a squat. They any
Hmm.
money that they earned went into one pot. They all kind of like ate together. They went out together. You know, and there was a power in that when, like you said, you know, there was quite a lot of, you know, kind of bullying and targeting going on, you know, for people who were, you know, they all dressed in black at the time, you know,
Hmm.
and that was almost like a kind of cue for all the, you know, kind of homophobes, you know, all the you know, the real sort of prejudices to sort of come out. And but that
Hmm.
kind of being together was like a real kind of powerful thing that, you know, that they had.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, with the kind of the so with I guess you kind of touched on it, but the people that you're sort of hanging out with. I mean, what what did that kind of give you as a kind of like a kid that's sort of growing up and finding,
Well, I mean,
you know, sort of
A,
who
it
you
gave
are?
me like further education. You know, like there was this group when I became a punk. There was this group of three girls who were my age, but you know, they had gotten into it maybe 2 years before me. So they
Mm,
showed me so much music, you know, and I was like, you know, oh my god, I heard Ramones and I heard the Sex Pistols and I heard Black Flag, and they'd
mm,
be like, oh, you got to check out X, you have to check out Bauhaus, you have to check out Crass, you know, you have to check out X-Ray Specs. Like I remember one of them showed me the Clash, which seems like an obvious band, but it's, you know, they kind of had minor hits in the States, but it's not something, I mean, you hear it on the radio now, but I didn't as a
mm,
kid, you
mm,
know. So
mm,
they were just showing me all this Minor Threat, like all this cool stuff. You know, so there was that education that everybody kind of gave each other, you know, lending each other tapes and CDs and records and stuff. Then
mm.
there was also just the safety aspect of it, you know, like
Yeah.
I'm still not a big guy, and I was, you know, when I was 14, I looked like I was like 8. You know what I mean? So,
Mm, mm.
and you had these guys at high school that were basically full grown men, but because you're the
Yeah.
same age, they feel like it's a fair fight to like mess with you, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, you know, I didn't always feel safe, but I had like some bigger punk friends. There was this amazing incident that happened. There was this guy named Pat who was a really big guy, very, very sweet punk dude. Um, we all used to hang out at this record store in our suburb, and we were there just hanging. You know, we would just like teenagers do, like sit outside and smoke cigarettes and talk just for
Mm,
hours or whatever. You know, and
mm, mm.
this van full of, you know, and there's maybe like 3 or 4 of us, and this van full of like jocks showed up, and there was this guy who was a bully. What was his name? Tom something, whatever. It doesn't matter. But anyways, they started messing with us. We're always like kind of turn the other cheek, whatever, you know. But this guy spits in Pat's face, and Pat is way bigger than him. This guy's an idiot. He thought that, yeah, I guess because they have like the bigger, more powerful group socially, that he would be
Yeah.
scared. But Pat grabbed this guy. He had like a padlock on his like chain, and he was just hitting this kid in the face with this padlock. And all these
Shit.
guys were like freaking out. They were
Oh
so
my
like
god.
terrified. They
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
cartoon. We're like back to their van, and it just felt like this amazing like victory for the punks, you know, because we didn't even start it. We were just minding our own business, and these assholes came up and started this with us, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean that was amazing. I remember that was on a weekend, so I remember at school, you know, on the following Monday, all the punks like really holding their head high, being like, "Well, you can't fuck with us because Pat will beat you up," you know. And they had this newfound, these like jocks and bros, they had this like newfound fear and respect for Pat, you know.
It's interesting, like you. I mean, going back to what you said, you mentioned the Clash.
Hmm.
Who like I know. I mean, Clash have got, you know, like anybody or any band that kind of got as big as the Clash, supporters and detractors. But for me, they what one. I mean, I love the Clash.
Same here. It's one
Actually,
of my favorite
I
bands.
mean,
Yeah.
I remember one day. This is what I had to fight with when I was growing up. It was like with my parents. So when the Clash brought out Combat Rock, We were on a holiday. We went on a kind of 2 week summer holiday down to the coast and stuff like that. And we stopped at this town, and I went into the record shop and bought a straight to hell t-shirt.
Mm.
I got back to the car, we all sort of met up again, and I said, "Oh, what have you been buying?" I said, "I got this t-shirt." So he had a look at it, and he because it got the word hell on it, he made me take it back. I had to take it back to the fucking shop.
That sucks.
Oh, it's just like I was.
That's an amazing shirt too, and that would have been an original one, right? So
it would have been, yeah.
I
was so pissed off. But anyway, for me, what they did, thinking about them, how they were not afraid to change their kind of sound. Like the departure. I mean, even the departure to London Calling, but the departure then to Sandinista, to Combat Right was just incredible. I mean, if you think about where they started.
I totally agree. And I mean, I think I say the Sex Pistols is the band that changed my life, but I definitely listen to the Clash more now. And if you catch me on the right day, I'll describe the Clash as my favorite band. And I think part of that is, it's that kind of like fearlessness. I really respect and try to do my own music, especially with Crocodiles, the right to do whatever kind of stuff you want, any kind of music. And that's what I always tell people about the Clash. I'm like, man, they did punk, disco, dub, reggae, hip hop, pop. They did everything,
Did everything.
And they did everything well. They did a good job at everything they tried, and they left behind, in a relatively brief career, they left behind this body of work that is maybe more varied than 99% of bands out there,
Absolutely. And I think, it's sort of pretty, these are the sort of things that that I loved about them. Like you said, it was that fearlessness, that, it's the kind of I suppose, curiosity and bravery to do that and not care. At least on the face of it, didn't look like they cared. They were just like, this is what we want to do. We're going to do it. A triple album.
Yeah.
Like Sandinista is just mind blowing, really, that they could do that.
And it's so full of variety and so many good songs.
Yeah.
There's so many good songs on that record. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, and I definitely feel like I've hearing stuff like that in a formative age also kind of gave me the knowledge that you can kind of do, as an artist, you should do whatever you want. You shouldn't feel restrained, it doesn't take away your punk credibility to try some other kind of music, and I was having this conversation with a friend the other day who, I met through punk as teenagers, and he doesn't go to punk shows at all anymore. And I doubt he ever really listens to punk. He's more into dance music and that kind of stuff now. But we were talking to him, he does commercial production stuff. And he was saying the big lesson. And I was saying that the fact, that he has a wife and kids, and he's doing this kind of unorthodox way of making a living through music, to me is still very punk. And he was saying he agreed, and that what he learned, the biggest lesson he took from punk is passion over credentials, And so he has the balls to try to make music for film. I mean, he gets work, doing stuff for film or for big companies doing commercials and stuff and he didn't go to school for it. He didn't have any real connections. He just said I want to do this. And he, that everything he learned from punk came out, and he just went maybe I don't have the credentials, but I have the creativity and I'll figure it out. And he's figuring it out, and it's really cool.
I think I actually think, I mean, that is partly why I started this podcast. it's that sort of thinking that the world that we kind of live in now, for if you take people outside of the kind of the musicians world, the creative world, so people who are kind of in paid employment, with employers, the sort of things that you kind of need now to to even survive, but to kind of flourish, I think it's much more around those kind of things like curiosity and adaptability, those sort of things, almost over some of the technical. I mean, sure, there are jobs where you need technical, credentials and stuff like that,
Yeah, I
the
don't need
stuff
my
that,
like heart surgeon to be well, I
yeah,
was a punk. I didn't
yeah,
have to go to school, don't worry.
yeah,
I'm passionate about
yeah.
it, you
Just trust me about it. Just trust me with this. It'll be fine.
know.
You'll still be here in a couple of days' time. Uh, but yeah, but kind of those sort of things where you have that that kind of creative push, that sort of curiosity. I just think those are so much more important these days, and musicians have really kind of lived with that. That's really been their kind of thing,
Hmm.
through since time began, really.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think that they're coming to. I mean, like when I do my video stuff now, I've never learned it. I've never learned it as a trade, but I what I like to think is I've got a kind of eye for it, and it's
yeah,
what your friend was saying. It's that kind of thing where you've got almost like the desire and the willingness to sort of push it. That
yeah.
works.
And I think like with your video stuff, it probably comes out a lot more clever and creative than maybe some people with more formal training, because you don't have that, you don't have those rules that you feel like you have to fall back on that were like drilled into you, you know.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah. I mean, that's a good point. With going back to when I played the cello, that's exactly one of the things that I felt restricted with, and even looking back now, I know that I was restricted with because it taught me within a framework.
Hmm.
Of like this is how you will learn, but also this is what we're going to teach you, and this is how it should be done. And if you
Yeah,
didn't do it that way, then you didn't get your marks, you didn't get your grades, and things like that.
yeah,
You
which I
know,
think kind of ruins it too for a kid.
it,
I mean, it's supposed to be
totally.
fun, you know.
Totally. That was exactly, kind of how I felt. So what I'm trying to do now, I bought myself one a couple of years ago, is to try and coach myself to think differently, to think the way that you think,
Hmm.
think, without those kind of rules and inhibitions that are perhaps may have or remember. And, it takes a bit of coaching for your mind.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that if you can do that, I mean, it's beneficial for you. I think with the cello that you do have that technical background, but it's so long ago now that maybe some of like the rigidness has gone away, but you'll still have like the
Yeah.
dexterity, you know,
Yeah.
and be
Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
like teach yourself and do some cool stuff with it, you know.
I remember like a friend just sort of said to me in a bit of a throwaway comment, just like, "Oh, you want to get some pedals for that?" So I kind of took it. I thought that might be quite interesting. So anyway, I
That would
bought
be,
myself a few sort of pedals. I just need to get myself find out which pickup works best for a cello,
yeah,
and then I'm ready to have a go at that now, man. So
exactly. Yeah, I mean, the world is your oyster. You can do literally whatever you want with it, you know. And that's what's cool about, like, my brother is a really formally trained musician. He's a jazz musician. He's a professor of jazz at the university up here. Um, but he's not like that, you know. Like his son is learning the trumpet. You know, my nephew
mm,
who's 11 is learning the trumpet because that's what my brother plays, and he looks up to him. But he's not like, oh, you have to practice this amount of hours a day, you're doing it wrong. He's just letting him have fun with it, you know? And like,
yeah,
if
yeah,
he wants to take it more seriously when he's older or now, he can. But my brother, you know, he remembers his youth enough to remember that like music is supposed to be fun. You know, if you want
it's a
to
good way. Yeah,
blow into the wrong end of it and it's fun for you and you're making a sound and it's cool and you feel creative, then there's nothing wrong with that, you know? And you
yeah,
can literally do it, hang upside down like a bat and play it. Like do whatever you want, you know,
yeah,
like
yeah.
just have a good time, you know?
I think that's totally right, and it's interesting, like how you. I'm thinking back to to my dad, because my dad was like, you need to practice, half an hour every day, blah blah blah, and all
Yeah.
this kind of stuff. And I just didn't want to, but
Yeah.
he's coming from how he learned,
Hmm.
and you can see how it's sort of passed through generations until I would, like, for my kids, like, say, okay, maybe that what I learned, the way that I did it wasn't the right way. So
Hmm.
let's try it this way. And like you say, like your brother's doing, let's have some fun with it while you're young,
Yeah.
and you still you don't think about falling out of love with it.
Exactly. You know, because the last thing you want to do is have a kid be excited about learning an instrument and then go, you know what, this is a drag. Like this
Yeah,
feels like
yeah,
math,
totally,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So,
And for you, that's, I think you mentioned it a few minutes ago about doing. being able to do whatever you want to do. I think we were talking about the Clash sort of feeling whatever you can do, whatever you want to do. I mean, is that something that you've kind of learned from them, but how easy does that come to you? Is it something that's kind of natural, or do you have to kind of talk to yourself to, to say, yeah, I can do this, or I can do this?
No, it's
this
pretty natural. It's natural now. It wasn't always natural. I remember the very first time I felt like I truly stepped out of my comfort zone was, so I had this like screamy kind of hardcore band, that was around from 2001 to 2007. And in that time, around 2005, actually the friend who does the commercial production stuff, he was still playing in hardcore bands, and we were living together at that time. And we were both just listening to so much like Kinks and the Clash and like Velvet Underground and like the really pretty melodic Velvet Underground stuff too. And we were listening to Belle and Sebastian, and we were listening to all these kinds of like pop stuff. And we're like, we want to figure out how to write songs like this too. It's still fun playing punk. It's still fun playing hardcore, but I want to know how to do this. So we started a band basically as like an exercise in how to learn how to do that. And we would sit there and we would figure out, how to sing harmony together. We would deconstruct the way like a Kink song was put together, even like the really poppy Clash stuff. Like how do they make a song like Spanish Bombs? Like that sounds beautiful. Like what are these chords? How does this work? Like learning little tricks, like sitting there playing like Sunday Morning by the Velvet Underground, and trying to learn this stuff. And we got a band together, and we had pretty, in retrospect, crappy songs, but they weren't, anyone only knew us as like, and so to come out and play, for the first time, like harmonizing and using our real voices and covering Sam Cooke and like doing all this stuff like that. I remember that was probably one of the more like terrifying moments of my life, because, I was just like, kind of felt like imposter syndrome, and also like that people even give it, I give a shit about this kind of music, but does anybody else give a shit about this kind of music in this little scene and blah, blah, blah. And but, got through it. And like I said, that band was short lived, and it was just kind of an exercise in how to learn how to write, but it was all stuff that we later brought into Crocodiles. Because then we understood how a pop song's constructed, and then we could run it back through like the punk filter and the weirdo filter and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, like, so I think that was kind of like what it was terrifying, but getting through that experience and doing it, made me realize like I can do whatever I want. And I don't care if someone thinks I'm like less punk or something because I did this kind of song or record. I truly do not care. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's a sort of great, I mean, such a good experience to have, isn't it? To, to do that. Because I mean, it's one of the hardest things when when I think like when you have, a relationship with people that you've had for a long time, it's on a certain level. They sort of see you for, they have an image of you, that is this, and kind of like, yeah, okay, like, in music terms, hardcore punk, blah, blah, blah. But what you were going to come out with is not on that list. So it's kind of like you're almost like adjusting how they perceive you. And that's sometimes hard. Yeah, I could totally sort of see that.
Like I remember playing a house party with that band, and Justin was there, and I was like, "Oh God, he's gonna think this is complete shit," because it's just like pop music. You know what I mean? I mean, it's yeah. But I was like, whatever, like this is what I want to be doing at this point. I still have a punk band, and I want to be doing this because I want to do any kind of music I want to do. And if I don't try it, don't learn how to do it, I'm going to be stuck only being able to do one kind of music for the rest of my life. And I don't want to be some 50-year-old who's the only thing I can do is scream on stage,
Because I mean, it's a good point though, because like the world likes to, I don't know whether it's just the way that, I think it is the way that our minds work. We like to pigeonhole things. We like to put things into kind of, little sort of boxes. It makes it easy to kind of categorize, doesn't it? And sort of work out. Yeah. And I mean, there are so many bands now that are kind of, even just in their own music, are bringing in so many different influences that it's hard, and which is a really good thing, that you can't, that the industry can't categorize it, because it's so kind of eclectic in its style, which I think is just great, because it's been too easy certainly for the industry, and probably that's I'm sure it's like a marketing ploy. It makes it easier to kind of categorize like hip hop or punk or soul, jazz, whatever.
Hmm.
Not as easy these days.
Yeah, I think that that's partly. I mean, my theory on that is it's partly down to the internet. Like I work in a bar, and when I see young people, like really young people, 21 or whatever, come in,
Mm,
I can't always tell like what they're into because they dress. They
mm,
like from the waist down, they look like they're into hip hop.
true.
Like
Yeah, yeah,
from like the torso up, they look like they're into punk, and then they look like a metalhead on top. Like you
yeah.
can't really tell. And I think that like probably the internet, the kids who grew up and discovered music on that, they were less. I mean, I definitely feel like youth tribes are like less of a thing now than
Yeah,
when
yeah.
I was younger. Um, at least
I
being
agree.
like, I'm this, I'm a punk, or I'm a rap guy, or I'm this, or I'm that. Now I feel like kids can kind of just be into whatever. I don't know because I'm not a kid, but the impression I get looking at young people, is that there's like less codified rules,
I completely agree.
and boundaries,
Yeah,
and I think that's, yeah, it's quite cool. It's quite cool that like someone, I mean, some of these kids, they, one day they're listening to whatever current rap, and the next day they're listening to the Smiths, and it's cool,
I completely agree. I think it's much harder to look at somebody and say, okay, I can kind of guess what sort of music they're into.
Hmm.
Yeah, compared to, I mean, I remember when I was a kid and like at school, you used to write your favorite bands names on your bag and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And then you'd get humiliated for it when there was some stuff on there that somebody didn't like, or
Yeah,
usually the kind of like the kind of big guy who could throw his weight around. And I
we should
remember
have
there
gotten my
was,
friend Pat to come beat him with his
yeah, exactly,
padlock.
yeah. I remember I was down at the school sports grounds, and I'd left my bag, and it had all sorts of kind of stuff on there, and I remember this. Yeah, no, he was somebody that you could look at him and say he was a punk. Definitely, he was a really good, really nice guy. We used to play football together, and kind of like we did get on. But he could be brutal,
Hmm.
and I saw him pick up my bag, and I just went, "Oh, fuck!" And he was just like, "Whose fucking bag is this?" There's all like there's teardrop explodes next to crass, and in those days, like people just didn't
I mean,
like
to me, that makes
those
complete
genres.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but at that time, as a teenager, it was
yeah,
like those worlds just didn't collide or anything like that. But
yeah.
it's so fun.
Yeah, I'm glad those kind of like stupid rules don't exist like that. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, yeah, it's
So,
ridiculous.
so when you're, I'm interested if we talk about collaborations for a minute, or people, kind of different people that you've
Yeah.
worked with, and how you kind of approach those, and how you obviously people work in different ways,
Hmm.
and how you kind of like identify the best way, how to get the best out of people, or and equally how those different personalities kind of work best together. How do you sort of approach those collaborations?
I mean, I've been pretty lucky. I mean, as a musician, I always try to play, even if I like have written the record or written the parts or whatever, I always try to play with people who are better than me.
Mm,
Um, so that I can like trust that they'll do a great job, and then I
yeah,
know I'll learn from them as
interesting.
well.
Yeah.
In terms of the personality thing, I mean, I've been pretty lucky. I haven't really like clashed with anybody I've played music with in a
Mm,
long, long, long time. And if it was, it was so like minor,
yeah, yeah.
so as to not be a big deal. Which means most of the people I play with, in various bands, I mean, we play for at least a few years until somebody moves or until there's like a life
Mm,
change. It's not usually like one tour, like get the fuck out of my band or something like that.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I just try to, it's the way I try to go through life anyway. I mean, I just try to treat everybody with respect and friendliness and
Mm,
humor and stuff. And I think for most people, if you do that, it's disarming and makes people feel comfortable, and then they can let their hair down as well. And, they'll treat
mm,
you the same way. I mean, I think it's just human nature. If you're treated with respect, you're going to treat that person with respect as well, and so
mm.
that's what I try to do. And, I'm sure I miss the mark sometimes. I'm a human being, but, in general, that's what I try to do.
I sometimes think of this, of um, if you take, kind of some people are introverts and some are extroverts, and like, sometimes introverts will have, some great ideas, but don't feel, the environment is right to be able to kind of bring them up.
Mhm.
And I guess that's, kind of like in bands, you need to have the, I guess, kind of confidence, in
Mhm.
what you do, and feel like, you're in the environment where you can kind of speak up. Sometimes when you're working with people that you're not familiar with, those kind of barriers can come up. I guess it just means that there's a lot of dynamics that are kind of playing, kind of interplaying with each other, aren't there?
Yeah, yeah, I guess there is. And I think maybe I just take it for granted because I've been doing it for long enough now that I kind of
Mm,
like, I mean, I don't usually play in other people's bands. I like starting my own thing. I have played in other
yeah.
people's bands, and it was fine. Like I played in my ex's band when I was living in Mexico. I played. Do you remember this band Davila 666
Yes. Yes.
from Puerto Rico?
I do. Yeah.
So I lived
Yeah.
with two of those guys, and I played in one of their solo bands. So I was just a hired gun.
Mm,
Um, but in those situations where I'm playing for somebody else, I mean, I just kind of behave the way I would hope people behave in my band. Like, this is an idea I have, but if it's your band, so if you don't like it, it's no problem, and don't take things personally,
yeah.
and just try my best to make their stuff sound as good as it can, or you know, try my best to make their stuff sound the way they want it to sound because it's their project, it's their name on it,
Yeah. Mm.
um, and then just same thing, just treat them with respect and hopefully be treated with respect back. And it's always been like that. So
It's interesting you mentioned about, kind of like working with, musicians that you feel are better than you, and
mhm.
does that I mean, does that ever have a sort of tendency to what's the how am I going to phrase this? Um, uh, I mean, I guess does that challenges you to improve or to, kind of better yourself?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, like I'll learn more for sure. And then it'll have me playing at the top of my ability,
the ability. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is like,
Got you.
I'm never going to go enter a guitar contest and impress anybody or win. I'm not that kind of musician,
Yeah, yeah,
and I know
yeah.
that about myself, I know what my strong suits are and
Mm.
what they aren't. So I like to find those people who could maybe enter a guitar competition and impress people, and then I can write some of the parts, but I'm not never going to play it as fluidly as somebody who is one of those kinds of musicians. So like I write most of the leads for the songs I write for Crocodiles. We each write half, and I wrote the Psychic Pig stuff, but I wouldn't ever want to play lead guitar in either of those bands. I couldn't play lead
Mm.
guitar in either of those bands. I can do a
Mm.
demo because I can get it once and then copy and paste it, and
Yeah.
kind of like cheat my way into making something presentable. But then I need to find someone who's actually quite good at guitar to like do it for real.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. How much does, kind of like your own intuition, like your gut instinct, how how important is that to you in, I can, again, not just in music but kind of like in your life?
I mean, I kind of feel like it's everything. It's probably
Mm,
everything, in life, in music and art, and in life in general, and um, it's weird. Like sometimes I feel like I have really good instinct and like bullshit detector, and then other times
mm.
I'm like, I have no idea like how to vet people or what I'm doing at all in this world. You know what I mean? Maybe this is the experience everybody has,
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, I think gut instinct. It's down to everything. I mean, the other day I didn't get on the bus because there was this guy, and I was like, "There's something off here."
doesn't feel
Like,
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, I'm just gonna wait for the next bus. He was just
Mm.
a little too. He was friendly and like a little too chatty with me. And then I saw he had a knife like in his back pocket, and I was just like, I don't need to be chatting
uh
with some guy in the middle of the night on the bus who's carrying a knife.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I was
I,
just like, I'm just gonna wait for
I,
the next. I'm gonna pretend I'm going to the shop. I'm gonna let the bus come, and I'm gonna wait for the next one. And just little gut thing. Maybe probably nothing would have happened, but I'd rather not have found out some other
I
way.
think I think honestly your instinct is right. I mean, I've kind of found this. I mean, I've this I think like this, like I've tended to, in some parts of my life for quite a long time, just analyze things, So
Mhm.
like I'll get a situation, and I'll kind of like think, well, what happens if I do this, or what happens if I do that, and what are the implications and all this sort of stuff. And then my instinct will be telling me something else, and then I've got to work out which one is right. And sometimes it's just like frustrated the fuck out of me.
Oh yeah,
Like I'm
yeah,
just like to myself, just come on, just decide. And honestly, when I go with my instincts, I mean, like 99% of the time, it's right.
yeah. I mean, I
It
think that,
really is.
and that makes sense, because we have millions of years of evolution that have helped us as humans like develop this instinct as like a survival thing, so
Yeah, yeah.
it makes sense that it would normally be right, because the
Mm.
reason you're here is because all your ancestors had that too, going down the line,
Yeah,
millions of
yeah.
years that they were able to survive long enough to procreate, and now you're here and we're doing this interview, and I think, yeah, like some of your ancestors from a million years ago's friends who didn't have that, they don't have like a line, they don't have any genetic lineage here anymore
Yeah.
because they didn't hone those instincts the same, and so they got eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or whatever. So
I wonder if my DNA is going to go back that far. I'll have to kind of try it out. I mean, if like say, I mean, as you've got older, have you found that you get more comfortable with, taking risks?
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure, because I realized that everything good that's ever happened in my life was because I gambled on myself, or I
yeah,
gambled on people that I trust,
mm,
or some combination of the two. So yeah, no, I feel pretty comfortable taking risks. And like, you know, when I was a kid, I really only told myself that I just didn't want to have like an ordinary life. I wanted to do
mm,
something, you know, extraordinary with my life, and I realized that that would come with risks too, like especially financial risks and stuff like that.
yeah,
Um, but I don't know. I mean, I've, yeah, I'm happy with all those decisions, and it's not like life is perfect, but I don't think anybody's life is perfect,
yeah.
yeah, and I've been like really fortunate and blessed to do some cool stuff and meet a lot of cool, great people. And yeah, I don't
I
know.
think as well with with sort of taking those risks, yeah, I mean, you kind of don't if you don't you don't have a chance to grow, to kind of like experience those successes, the ones where you do drop the ball, it just don't work out and stuff like that, which might feel like disastrous at the time, but we are kind of adaptable.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
We do get through shit, when things don't go the way that we want to. But again, this is a lot like I kind of think that this is what life is now. Life is so very volatile. It's like it's almost like going back to my analytical brain. It's almost impossible to have because you the unpredictability is just so much greater there that even like I don't know 6 7 years ago.
hmm Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, the world just seems to be getting kind of more and more unpredictable, like you say,
Mm,
and that kind of just also feeds into like, well, I can't really, I just need to do what like makes me happy, and
yeah,
try to keep myself happy and try to like spread like a little joy and love, because it's like a
yeah,
dark world. I mean, literally, I feel like, are India and Pakistan going to start a nuclear war with each other? And then when they do, how do we get sucked into that? And like the world could end this year, like it
yeah.
feels possible, and so I'm like,
It does,
I don't want
yeah.
to worry too much. I mean, I need to pay my bills and pay my rent and stuff like that, but like I can't sit here fretting over how I'm going to feed myself when I'm 85, because I don't know if I'll be
Yeah.
85. I don't know if the world will exist when I'm 85, and
Yeah, yeah. No, you're
so
absolutely
like
right.
have your good time now, enjoy it now, because tomorrow's not guaranteed.
I think that's a really great way to look at it. And I hope that means that we're going to get a Psychic Pigs triple album as well with all these different influences.
Yeah, yeah. There'll be some dub stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
Some hip hop. Yeah.
Brilliant. Brandon, it's been great to talk to you. Thanks so much, man.
You as well, Giles. Thank you very much, man.